A former federal prosecutor is running for Wisconsin Attorney General, and in his case, it runs in the family. Josh Kaul is an attorney with the Madison law firm Perkins Coie. He served as an assistant U.S. attorney in Baltimore before returning to Wisconsin in 2014. And he's also the son of former State Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager. Now, Kaul, a Democrat, will challenge Republican incumbent Brad Schimel in 2018, and he joins us now on Upfront. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
Let me ask you about your first step in this race. When you got into this race, you did so with an apparent jab at Attorney General Brad Schimel, saying that this job should be about protecting families and not playing politics. In what way do you think Brad Schimel is playing politics with the job?
So I think that our Attorney General has, especially in his first few years in office, spent far too much time focusing on things like lawsuits against policies enacted under President Obama. I'll give you an example of that. One of the regulations enacted under President Obama guaranteed overtime pay to people who make between about $23,000 and $47,000 a year and put in the work. Brad Schimel got involved in a suit to challenge that policy. I don't think that's in the interest of Wisconsinites, and I think it's a waste of money. And I think that that sort of attitude to the job has cost us. We have a system right now, an Attorney General, who just isn't getting the job done for the people of the state. I think our Department of Justice is broken on issue after issue. We've seen failure. There's no better example of that than our rape kit backlog. There are, think about the courage it takes for somebody who's a survivor of sexual assault to come forward. And yet in Wisconsin, we have thousands of untested rape kits just sitting on shelves because Brad Schimel hasn't made that a priority. So we have a lot of areas where we need change, and that's a good example of it.
In what way? What would you do to solve that problem?
Well, the rape kit problem in particular, first of all, I think we need an AG who's going to prioritize that problem. Brad Schimel keeps getting asked questions about this. He doesn't know how many kits there are in the backlog. He claimed there was no backlog. PolitiFact looked into that and found that that was false. So I think we need somebody who's going to make clear that we need to test these kits as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we didn't invest in capacity early on so that we could test the kits. But I think we need an AG who's going to say this is a priority, and we need to do everything we can to eliminate the backlog as soon as possible.
Now, in your role as an attorney, you've dealt with election law. You've challenged the state on cases involving voter access, voter ID. And you've been opposite the Attorney General, who has defended the state and the laws passed by the governor and the legislature. If that were to happen and you were Attorney General, how do you deal with cases like voter ID, like redistricting, that you certainly have a different point of view than the current Attorney General?
This is an issue on which I think there's some agreement between the current Attorney General and me. The Attorney General's job is to defend the laws of the state as long as there's a reasonable basis for defending them. Where we differ, I think, is that the Attorney General does also have a role of advocating to the public and explaining where we're going wrong and how the legislature can do a better job. So redistricting is a great example. The AG's job is to defend our redistricting rules, and I don't have any objection to that. But I also think there's a role for the AG to speak to the legislature and to say, we need a better system in place so that we're not wasting millions of dollars litigating these cases, and so we have voters choosing their representatives, not the other way around.
All right, you mentioned priorities, that you believe that Attorney General Shimel's priorities are not where they should be. One of his priorities has been addressing the opioid crisis in this state. Has he handled that well? He's gone about it the right way?
I don't think so. I think that there's been some decent public education work that's been done under Brad Schimel. But, this is a serious crisis. We have families that are being ripped apart by this epidemic. There are kids who, when social services show up at houses, are found just sitting there unattended to, sometimes with needles laying around. And I don't think we're responding to this like the crisis it is. I think we need to do several things differently. First of all, I think we need to do more to target traffickers so that people who are sending drugs across state lines and sometimes international lines are the focus of our investigation. That's a lot of what I did as a federal prosecutor, and I think we need to do more of it. Second, I think we need to invest in treatment in a way that we haven't done before. And that includes fighting for expanded access to health insurance and opposing efforts to reduce access to health insurance so that people can get the treatment they need. And last, I think we need an AG who's going to be unafraid to go after the pharmaceutical companies to the extent that they played a role in creating this crisis.
All right. Josh Kaul, candidate for Attorney General. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Mike McCabe, the former executive director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, will enter the Democratic race for governor next month. Our editorial partner, WisPolitics.com, reports McCabe plans a September 12th announcement at the Clark County farm where he grew up. You'll find the latest on the growing field of candidates for governor on the election blog at WisPolitics.com. Next on Up Front, former Sheriff David Clarke teasing questions about his future.